This is a very difficult video for me because I've been keeping this with myself for a while and it has become suffocating. But I think I owe it to you guys and to myself to be honest about who I really am. So anyway, I don't want to prolong this too long. It's time to finally get out of the closet and announce that I am officially entering the left. Okay, let's think of a new name. Something sexy, funny, but also indicates that now I'm left. So maybe call me Treadwife. That's cool. Is it taken? Oh shit. Yeah, it's taken. I could still use it though, just like at call me Treadwife, I guess. Shit, it's recording. Hello comrades, it's great to finally be able to be myself with you guys. It has been such a relief since I finally entered the left and I'm able to express everything that I want to achieve politically. Because as a lefty, of course, I understand that our fight isn't easy. To end capitalism and kill all landlords takes a lot of effort and we need to work together. That's why we, workers of the world, must unite and organize ourselves. And for a mere $5 a month, you can join me in my Patron and you can take an active part on that revolution. And just for a little more, you get a discount to access my OnlyFans and my promise that I will be personally holding your hand when you kill your first landlord. You'll have my guarantee on that.
Not a guarantee. And now for something completely different.
About a year ago, I live streamed myself during the political compass, and even though I was quite drunk at the time and misunderstood a couple of questions, the final result was a pretty accurate picture of my politics. About a month or so ago, I decided to do the political compass test again, and I was quite surprised to see how my politics have shifted towards the left. That of course got me thinking what has changed about my politics that made that shift on the spectrum. And if you consider that about 2 years ago, when I did the political compass, my position was on the center, slightly to the right, this has been a quite significant shift on my politics. And I think I should try to understand what it means, and this video is basically a reflection about that. Now, this isn't the first time that I have a big shift in my politics. I mean, when I was a teenager, I used to be far left. Over time, I became more moderate and more of a centrist, and it seems that I am moving towards the left again. Now, I may be wrong about this, but I do think that changing our politics is a process that every person who cares about politics goes through. In my case, I always question and challenge myself and try to see different ideas from my current beliefs, and nobody is always right. And when you realize that some of your beliefs are wrong, or some of your political strategies that you defend are ineffective, that makes you change your politics. And when you see a considerable change like this one, it's usually a result of you being disillusioned or disappointed at a particular ideology or political philosophy. And in my case, I think the big catalyst for this considerable change was realizing the limitations and failures of liberalism. Now, I know that very rarely I refer to myself as a liberal, because for a while I've been trying to steer away from political labels, because I want to avoid being committed to one specific ideology or political philosophy. I try to keep my mind open as much as possible. And I think until, well, at least a year ago, liberal was the best word to describe my politics. Well, at least according to my understanding of what liberalism is, because if you think about it, people have very different ideas of what a liberal person is. I mean, depending on where you are geographically, calling yourself a liberal can mean almost opposite things. Here in Australia, for example, liberalism is associated with right-wing politics. The Liberal Party of Australia is the major conservative party in this country. In the UK, and I think Europe in general, liberalism is usually associated associated with Gladstonian liberalism, which according to our modern standards would be considered a moderate conservative political philosophy. Named after British Victorian Prime Minister William Gladstone, this type of liberalism consists in limiting the role of the state in the economy with low taxation, austerity policies, and little market intervention. In the social side, Gladstone emphasized individualism and individual freedoms, such as freedom of speech, while promoting equality of opportunity via institutional reform. Particularly in the US, this type of liberalism is referred to as classical liberalism. But in the USA, liberalism is associated with progressive politics, not conservatism. The type of liberalism associated with the American Democratic Party is social liberalism. In contrast to Gladstonian liberals, social liberals believe in a more direct involvement of the government in reducing inequality, also believing that equality of opportunity is not enough. When it comes to the government's role in the economy, social liberals may range from austerity-free trade types to interventionists to downright corporatists like the Clintons, for example. Now, the USA doesn't really have a liberal party, but the term lib is often used to refer to Democrats, which is a party that oscillates between center-left and center-right. Which, by the way, noticing how the Democrats oscillate between center-left and center-right, while the Republican Party oscillates between center-right and far-right, is a very good clue to see how American politics is markedly right-leaning, well, at least mainstream politics. And here in Australia is actually quite similar, because the Labour Party is actually centre-left, while the Nationals and Liberals coalition is oscillating between moderate right and far right. Now, I came to Australia about 6 years ago, and during this time I became more in touch with Australian and American politics. I come from Brazil, where our politics is completely different. It's much more left-leaning than it is here, even though that also has changed. Being more in touch with Australian and American politics made me realize a very important thing. I don't like any of these political parties. Liberals, Labour, Democrats, Republicans. I hate all of them. Now, I've been talking about left and right-wing politics, but honestly, what the fuck does that mean? Because people also have different ideas of what right and left-wing politics is. For example, I have been called right-wing because I state that the human species has only 2 sexes, which is correct. So according to some, being right or left-wing depends on whether you accept the critical theory of gender or you don't. And similarly, you have people like Ariel Scarcella, who defines being right or left-wing depending on whether you support the LGBT movement or you don't. I mean, her whole brand is about being a conservative ex-lefty lesbian who supported Donald Trump during the last US election. But when she actually did a political compass test, her politics are actually left-wing.
The results.
So what does this mean?
So you're like...
Okay, so what does this mean?
So as you can see, just like liberalism, people use the terms left and right to signify different things. And online, honestly, these terms are rarely used to describe your views on political economy, as you would use these terms in political theory. In online political discourse, left and right are identities used to indicate your allegiance to one group or the other. And since political discourse online in the English language is almost entirely dominated by Americans, left wing usually means Democrat, right wing usually means Republican. That's what it is online. But to the rest of us who aren't Americans, this is a fucking pain in the ass, and not of the good kind. Because most of political discourse among Americans are about American issues that most of us don't really give a fuck about. And it's worse than that because of the influence that American organizations and institutions and people have all over the world. We are all affected by their culture wars bullshit. We often have these American values and ideas forcibly imposed on us through online discourse. If you see how Americans recently are using critical race theory to refer to France laicite as racist, is a good example of that. Critical race theory is based entirely off an American perspective, a view of American society. But Americans use that to basically judge the rest of the fucking world, when of course course, that is not always applicable everywhere. Each society has a different history, and over the last few years I realized that American liberals are just as bad as American conservatives in doing that. Now, you all know how I am a big critic of identity politics and corporate censorship, and these things come mostly from American liberals. And when Americans use their privileged position online to force things on people from other places, they are engaging in nothing short of cultural imperialism. That's what it really is. And I think I moved away from the political center and from liberalism as a way to resist this bullshit. Now, as we've seen so far, American liberals aren't really left-wing, meaning socialist. They are center-left at most. And at the same time, moderate conservatives who are on the center-right are also liberals.
No way.
So from that we can conclude that liberalism is the establishment's political philosophy. If you are a liberal, most, if not all of your political positions are not in what would be considered extreme or radical in the current political climate's overton window. The overton window of political possibilities is a concept created by policy analyst Joe Overton in the 1990s, in which he argued that what really matters for creating policy changes is not the personal views of the politician or even how persuasive their argument is, but the political climate of public opinion at a given time. So what think tanks, pundits, activists, media and political parties should focus on is changing the political climate so the window of possibilities can move across the political spectrum, and ideas that today are considered to be unthinkable may become acceptable in the future. But what would happen if I go around the internet calling myself a lefty? Well, a lot of people, especially Americans, would start making assumptions about my politics that are totally incorrect. Because, as I've said earlier, being left or right in online political discourse means allegiance to a team. Kind of like a football game. If you are on the right-wing conservative team, you will say that every single political position that you don't like is the left. You know, that's how you end up with pundits like Dave Rubin or Steven Crowder saying that Nazism is the left.
Is there some far right, which really is far left because it's collectivist, is there some white nationalist problem on the right?
Which really is far left because it's collectivist.
What do we hear about Hitler? He was
super right-wing.
Right-wing. Nazi stands for National Socialist German Workers' Party. I know what you're going to say. National Socialism, not democratic socialism like Bernie Sanders. There's a huge, one is fascism, right-wing, one is not. They're both socialism.
Crowder is in fact wrong on both accounts. National Socialism or Nazism was a totalitarian movement and political party led by Adolf Hitler in Germany during the 1930s and 40s. The pillars of Nazism were nationalism, populism, and racism. Nazis used the appeal of socialist rhetoric to gain popularity among German workers during the economic crisis of the 1930s. Winning power, Nazis instituted many populist policies that improved the living standards of the working class, while at the same time privatizing many national companies, benefiting a select elite of industrialists loyal to the Nazi party. In the social sphere, Nazis believed the German state should promote traditional German and Nordic values, and everything that was modern and foreign, arts, philosophy, religion, was regarded as inferior and had no place in a future German Empire or Reich. So despite calling themselves socialists, very little of Nazi ideology and policies was, in fact, inspired by socialism. Democratic socialism is how social democracy is branded in the United States. Social democracy is an ideology that promotes robust welfare programs and nationalization of certain key industries of the economy in order to reduce wealth inequality generated by capitalism. Most social democrats share many liberal values and oppose revolutionary socialism, which makes their status as socialists arguable at best. And on the other side, you end up with left-wing pundits and influencers like Vosh saying that every single position they don't like is conservative. Like, for example, when he referred to tankies, Leninist Marxist socialists as being conservative.
And then it's just like anti-tanky shit. And it's like, I understand you exist
Tankies
online.
are conservative.
I just exist online.
Now, the result of treating politics like a football game is, of course, groupthink. Think of all major conservative political pundits. If you look at their positions on specific issues, all of them agree on everything. With very few exceptions, there is no divergent opinion. They all just parrot each other. And honestly, I believe that the main reason for this phenomenon is the fact that these influencers and pundits know fuck all about political theory and political philosophy, or anything else for that matter. And the ones who get really big, do so by basically staying inside the overton window of their team, while vilifying every single position deemed too extreme as being part of the other team, which is how you end up with aberrations such as the fishhook and the horseshoe theory. And the same way that you see conservative pundits saying that Nazism is a left-wing ideology, you would see left-wing pundits who are actually liberals referring to dialectical materialism, you know, the basis of Marxist philosophy, as being class reductionism and a form of white supremacy. I mean, seriously, I've seen people on Twitter who call themselves lefties referring to dialectical materialism as white supremacy. I'm not fucking joking. But this makes sense if you think that if you are a liberal, if you are in the middle of the political spectrum, your goal will be to maintain the political discourse inside the overton window. You will deem all ideas outside the window as either being communism if you are a conservative liberal, or as being fascism and white supremacy if you are a progressive liberal. And this is how you make sure that the mainstream of political discourse is pro-establishment. Because with very few exceptions, almost every position that is anti-establishment is vilified by both sides equally. And this is something that Noam Chomsky has observed in The Common Good. The smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum, even encourage the more critical and dissident views. That gives people the sense that there is free thinking going on, while at the same time the presuppositions of the system are being reinforced by the limits put on the range of the debate. Now, my solution to avoid playing these fucking stupid games is to just avoid political labels altogether. I mean, technically, yes, I am left-wing. And even though my politics are still influenced by liberalism, I mean, I'm not that far left, I will not call myself a liberal because I don't want to be part of the liberal team. And if I'm going to put a label on my politics, probably social democrat would be the best one. So anyway, I reckon that the reason why I have moved more towards the left was basically as a rebellion against Democrats. Because during the last election, Democrats fucking pissed me off. I was disgusted by their hypocrisy. It's just crazy, and still is going on. And I am fairly progressive, and I think at the current moment, on the conservative side, the overton window is moving more and more towards the right, towards the far right. I do think it's important that we move the progressive window more towards the left. I don't really believe anymore that liberalism can really counter right-wing populism. I think the left needs to reach the working class. At the moment, what is considered left-wing in online discourse is extremely elitist. It's not reaching the common people and dealing with culture wars bullshit that doesn't really address the material needs of people who are actually suffering. And I worry that if left-wing discourse is so dominated by liberals that the right is gonna win, and we're gonna see far-right regimes more and more often, especially in politically unstable nations like the United States of America. I want to do my part, as small as it is, to avoid that from happening. Well, thank you all for watching. As always, a major thank you to all of my subscribers, and ultra special thank you to my dear patrons. I really appreciate your support. Thanks so much. I've been Sarah Michel, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!